He was the kind of woman every neighborhood loved. Sweet, warm, always smiling, always cooking, always ready with a kind word and a home-cooked meal. Nannie Doss was the grandmother everyone wished they had, the neighbor everyone trusted, the woman nobody ever suspected. And between 1927 and 1954, she poisoned 11 people, 4 husbands, 2 children, 2 sisters, her own mother, and 2 of her grandchildren, all while smiling, all while humming to herself, all while reading romance novels and dreaming of finding her perfect man. Nancy Hazel was born on November 4, 1905 in Blue Mountain, Alabama. Her childhood was difficult. Her father was a strict and controlling man who rarely allowed his children any freedom or joy. Nannie later said that her father's cruelty shaped everything that came after. At 15, she met her first husband, Charlie Braggs. They married quickly, had 4 children together, but the marriage was miserable. Charlie was unfaithful and irresponsible. 2 of their children died under mysterious circumstances. Charlie eventually fled the marriage, taking 1 child with him and leaving Nannie behind. It was the beginning of a pattern that would define the next 3 decades of Nannie Doss's life, a search for the perfect romance, and a willingness to remove anyone who stood in the way of that dream. Nannie Doss married 5 times in total. Each marriage followed a similar pattern. She would meet a man through a Lonely Hearts column in a romance magazine, fall quickly into a relationship, marry, and then within months or years the husband would become sick, suffer terribly, and die. Frank Harrelson was her second husband. He drank heavily and was abusive. He died in 1945 from what doctors recorded as stomach problems. Arlie Lanning was her third husband. Pleasant enough but too fond of other women. He died in 1952. His house mysteriously caught fire shortly after his death, burning down the home his mother had been due to inherit. Richard Morton was husband number 4. He lasted less than a year before dying of what doctors called a digestive complaint. And Samuel Doss was husband number 5. He died in 1954, just weeks after taking out a substantial life insurance policy. Each death was attributed to natural causes. Each death was mourned publicly by the smiling, grieving widow. And each death put a little more money in Nannie Doss's pocket. Nannie Doss's weapon of choice was arsenic, odorless, tasteless, and in 1950s America relatively easy to obtain. She added it to food, to coffee, to the stewed prunes she was famous for preparing for her husbands. She was an excellent cook. Her meals were always prepared with care and love and attention to detail. She took pride in feeding the people around her, and she took equal pride in the efficiency with which the arsenic did its work. Victims suffered from severe stomach cramps, vomiting, weakness. The symptoms mimicked food poisoning or gastroenteritis so closely that doctors rarely looked further. In an era before routine toxicology, testing, a determined poisoner with a warm smile and a good reputation could kill repeatedly without suspicion. And Nannie Doss did exactly that for nearly 30 years. It was the death of Samuel Doss, her 5th husband, that finally unraveled everything. Samuel had been hospitalized with severe stomach illness, recovered, come home, and then died suddenly just days after Nannie had prepared him a special meal to celebrate his return. His doctor was suspicious. He requested an autopsy. The results were unambiguous. Samuel Doss had been poisoned with a massive dose of arsenic. Police arrested Nannie Doss immediately. When investigators began looking into her past, the full scale of what she had done began to emerge. Bodies were exhumed. Tests were conducted. Arsenic was found in husband after husband. in family member after family member. The sweet, smiling grandmother who had been feeding people poison for 30 years had finally been caught. What happened during Nannie Doss's interrogation shocked even the most experienced investigators. She confessed readily, cheerfully almost. She described each murder in detail without apparent remorse or distress. She giggled at certain points in her confession, smiled warmly at the detectives questioning her. She seemed genuinely unbothered by the gravity of what she was admitting. When asked why she had killed her husbands, she gave an answer that has haunted true crime researchers ever since. She said that none of them had been the right man, that she had been searching her whole life for her perfect romance, the kind she read about in her beloved romance novels, and that the men she married had consistently disappointed her. The giggling grandmother had killed 11 people in pursuit of a fantasy she had read about in paperback novels. Nannie Doss was tried for the murder of her fifth husband, Samuel Doss. She pleaded guilty and was sentenced to life imprisonment. She could not be given the death penalty in Oklahoma at that time because she was a woman. Throughout the trial, she maintained her cheerful demeanor. She smiled at the judge. She smiled at the jury. She smiled at the reporters who crowded the courtroom to get a look at the woman the newspapers had nicknamed the Giggling Granny, the Lonely Hearts Killer, the Black Widow. She seemed almost to enjoy the attention, as if the trial was just another chapter in the romance story she had been living in her head her entire life. Only the other characters in her story had not survived to read the ending. In prison, Nannie Doss continued to be the cheerful, cooperative woman she had always appeared to be on the outside. She was a model prisoner. She got along well with guards and fellow inmates. She continued reading her romance novels. She remained warm and friendly and apparently content with her situation. She never expressed remorse for what she had done, never showed grief for the people she had killed, never acknowledged the suffering she had caused to families who had trusted her completely. She was diagnosed with leukemia in 1964. She died in prison on June 2, 1965, still smiling as far as anyone could tell, and leaving behind a story that criminologists and psychologists have been trying to fully understand ever since. What makes Nannie Doss such a disturbing figure in true crime history is not just the number of her victims or the duration of her killing. It is the complete disconnect between her outward personality and what she was actually doing. Most serial killers display some signs of their inner life, some coldness, some detachment, some hint of the darkness within. Nannie Doss displayed none of that. She was genuinely warm, genuinely social, genuinely liked by almost everyone who knew her. Psychologists who have studied her case believe she may have suffered from a severe personality disorder that allowed her to completely compartmentalize her actions, to genuinely experience herself as the loving grandmother she appeared to be, while simultaneously being capable of poisoning the people around her without a second thought. She was not acting. She was simply two completely different people at the same time. Nannie Doss killed 11 people over 27 years. She was never suspected until the very end. She was caught only because one suspicious doctor refused to accept a convenient explanation for an inconvenient death. Her case changed the way American law enforcement approached suspicious deaths in domestic settings. It contributed to the development of more rigorous toxicology testing protocols. And it permanently altered the public perception of the sweet elderly woman next door, because Nannie Doss proved something deeply unsettling. That evil does not always look like evil. Sometimes it looks like your grandmother, smiling warmly, offering you a plate of home-cooked food and humming softly to herself in the kitchen. 11 victims, 27 years, 4 husbands, her own mother, her own grandchildren, all poisoned by a woman who giggled through her confession and smiled at her sentencing. Nannie Doss was not a monster in appearance. She was somebody's neighbor, somebody's friend, somebody's grandmother, and that is what makes her story so deeply chilling. If this story disturbed you, please subscribe to Echoes of the Dead, because every single week we uncover the darkest and most forgotten true crime cases in history. Because every victim deserves to be remembered, and every story deserves to be told.